All right, everybody, let's dive deeper into some statistics that are not only impacting the villages, but Florida as a whole. Hopefully, by seeing this, it gets you thinking about some things. So the first article we're going to look at is from the Tampa Bay Economic Development Council. It shows the net migration pattern by state. And I've highlighted what I feel is the most important details in the article. So here it says, according to the latest data from the U.S. Census, Florida ranks number 1 in total net migration, which measures the difference between the number of people moving in and the number of people moving out of the state. So from July 2021 to July of 2022, Florida netted 444,500 people into Florida. If you compare it to the previous year, which I find astonishing, there were 185,000 people added into the state. So this difference between the 444,500 and the 185,000 is the largest year-over-year impact of residents moving to the state since 1957. So if you look here, it shows the population of California at 39 million, Texas at 30 million. Florida right now is at 22.2 million people. Additionally, Florida ranked number 1 in domestic migration, number 2 in international migration, and Florida is netting 1,218 people a day into the state right now. So this shows Florida compared to other states for that same time period. And you'll see Florida added the number we talked about above. Here's Texas, North Carolina, Georgia. And then over here to the right are the states that are losing people. So New York being 1, California being number 2. I moved my uncle from La Jolla, California, which is outside of San Diego, to the villages. So he's part of these numbers here. Illinois. The next article I'm going to show you is from CBS News. And it's titled, America's Hitting Peak 65 in 2024 as a record number of boomers reach retirement age. And again, I highlighted this here. Well, what it is showing is 11,000 Americans a day are expected to celebrate their 65th birthday from now until December. 4.1 million Americans are poised to turn 65 this year and every day through 2027. I thought this was funny. Experts have not only dubbed this peak 65, but a silver tsunami. That's the first I'm hearing those words. This website will show you by 2020, the number of adults ages 60 to 64 is expected to be nearly twice what it was in 2000. And that's what it'll show you down here. So in 2020, 20.7 million Americans reached the ages of 60 to 64. But look at 2025, another 20.8 million are entering into that age range. So you'll see this is the baby boom era, 1946 to really 64, but they have it till 65 here. But look at all the folks hitting retirement age. Because so many people are moving to Florida, we're now the inflation hotspot. And this is an article from CNN. So inflation is a hotspot because of persistent sky-high housing costs. It shows that inflation in Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach is running at 9%. Tampa, St. Petersburg at 7.3%. And the national average is 4%. So this article goes on to give more reasons why inflation is happening in Florida. So the first paragraph talks about the pandemic and the transition to remote work. So when folks got the freedom to relocate where they wanted, Florida was an excellent choice for them. They came here because the economy was strong. Also, demand in South Florida, a lot of it is coming from non-Floridians and even non-American investors. But the other part here is generally wealthy folks are also pouring into Florida. which are less price sensitive, that is also driving up prices. Here's what we talked about, the largest population growth by percentage since 1957. Housing costs account for a third of the Labor Department's Consumer Price Index. So rising interest rates, limited housing stock in cities such as all over Florida really are really pushing up pricing. Also, it talks about here AirBNBs. That is happening in the villages as well. I would say it's become really big over the last maybe 2 or 3 years. And that across the country, as well as in Florida from investors, is also driving up prices because homes that used to be rentals or for sale are now AirBNBs, taking away some of that supply. Another article about why Florida's inflation is so high. Another one we didn't talk about was the high amount of tourists into the state. We are actually getting record tourism here. So right here it shows a surge in tourism is bumping up demand. And here Ron DeSantis, our governor, talks about we had 137.6 million visitors, which is 12.9% more than 2021. An influx of newcomers is clashing with a limited housing market that can't meet the increased demand, thus driving up prices for renters and buyers. So this is an article was just from today, March 13th, 2024, and interest rates for mortgages dropped a little bit below 7%. But what happened is a surge in applications for the second straight week. But the interesting thing I also highlighted is purchase application volume increased, but it's still 11% below last year's level. So a lot of people, buyers, maybe you, are on the sidelines. Right now in the villages, this is the inventory, and this actually cuts off, it always runs about 2 months behind, but this is through January 2024, and this is MLS inventory. And what I'm going to show you is it stays pretty consistent. It's roughly, typically in the MLS world, about 3.5% of month supply of inventory. When you add in VLS, that probably brings it to 5 or 6 months, but it's a very healthy market. Right now, I looked this morning, there are just under 1,000 homes listed in the villages. And I've had some people say, well, Chris, that's high. I definitely don't feel that. If you take 1,000 and divide it by 71,000, that equates to about 1.4% of listings on the market at a given time. That is actually really low compared to other markets. So this is housing inventory across the entire U.S. And this comes from the Federal Reserve Economic Data Division out of St. Louis. And what you're going to see, the active homes across the country continuing to decline with a low of January of 2022 and it going up a little bit. Here in the villages, this is showing the resident population going back to 2010, and you'll see a steady increase of the population. Right now, we are roughly around 150,000 people that live in the villages. You'll see the only decline in the whole history of the villages right here. And what was happening here? This was COVID. You'll see the population dropping from 133,772 to 130,298. Here is the price index put out by Fred. And this is specifically the house price index for the villages. So this goes back to the early 2000s. You'll see an increase, kind of steady, but look at it taking off corresponding to all those people moving to Florida. This also goes along with that. This is the house price index for Florida. So you'll see a steady increase except for here. And if you remember what was happening here, this was the mortgage crisis that happened in like '06 through '10. But even then, look at the prices going up, up, and away. My prediction for the prices in Florida is it will be the next California as far as pricing. There is not and probably never will be enough supply of housing in a much smaller state than California. So you can see what's happening. Lack of supply driving up prices. I'm going to end with this. So over the course of time in my 20 years in the Villages, I have owned 12 houses. The reason for showing you this is many of you are on the sidelines right now. You're maybe trying to work another year or two and sock away money. You're waiting for certain Social Security benefits to kick in or things you can tap into without penalty. I definitely want you to encourage you to look at doing something sooner in the Villages. No one has more experience not only selling real estate here, but I've also been an owner here. These are 12 homes that I have owned, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about them to maybe pique your interest. So this first home I bought here, I bought it for a lady I met at an open house. She was retired from the Broward County School District. She lived down the road. She actually came after the mortgage crisis, and she said, Chris, I'm never going to be able to sell my home. My retirement dreams, I don't want them to be crushed. So I'm going to become a permanent renter. I do get Social Security and a Broward pension. So I said, well, I consider buying you a house. And I bought her this one. She signed a 5-year lease. At the end of that lease, she said, Chris, I'm getting older. I've got a dog. It's hard for me to take my dog out. I saw this home here in Bison Valley. Would you consider buying it for me? And I thought to myself, okay, I guess maybe I did. But I said to her, I'd really have to backfill a tenant there to be able to do that. Well, lo and behold, a gal named Darlene called me. And I'd moved her out of the Villages to an independent living facility. She wanted to move back. And I said, well, Darlene, if you'll consider renting 1618 Navidad, I'll buy this one for Sue Ellen. So that did work out. So Sue Ellen moved to this house. This rental continued on. This home here was a 3-year rental. This home here was about a 6 or 7 year rental. Here was about a 6 or 7 year rental. I owned this for 6 or 7 years, 3 years, 6 or 7. This was one of the few seasonal homes that I owned here. This was in Mallory Square. I owned this for about 6 or 7 years. And the bottom 3 were flips that I did in the Villages. But I can tell you, my mom was several years away from retiring, and she wanted to buy at today's prices. We grew up in Maryland. She was finishing up her work life in Georgia. And what we did was she bought something in the village of Collier. I helped her find a 2-year tenant unfurnished. What was neat was the guy was actually from Maryland. He owned a landscaping business. He wanted to plop himself down in the Villages while he was finishing selling his business in Maryland. But it worked out great for him because he got to be down here and work on selling his business. It also worked out great for my mom because she got an early retirement package offering, and the tenant actually wanted to vacate early. So my mom was able to come down to the Villages early. At the time, I believe she was rented her designer home for around $2,500 a month. Prices are way past that now for what she has. But she was able to lock in at today's prices for something in the future and offset it by having a tenant in there. What I will also say about tenants, it's a high quality person like yourself. I've never even seen any damage, wild and crazy parties like I have with one of my college rentals. It's just a great tenant like you. So I'm hoping by seeing this and what is happening in the Villages in Florida, it piques your interest about maybe doing something sooner. I am definitely an expert when it comes to owning and renting. So please, if you have any questions, go to my website, chrisdayhomes.com. You can call me right from there. You can email me or scroll down to the bottom of the website and get my information through the info portion and send me a message. I'd love to help you or answer any questions you have about owning, renting, purchasing sooner. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please hit the like button and please subscribe. As I mentioned, I've been around for 20 years and I'm going to fill what's in my head and yours over the course of time. Thank you.